call the 2026 meeting of the Park Housing Authority to order. First order of business is to welcome two appointments. Dan McCarthy, who's our office manager, and property manager. That I'm just meeting for the first time. Claire Williams, good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the meeting. It's nice to have you here. Nice to have you as part of our organization. Okay, so any approval or amendments to our agenda?
I have one addition that I'd like to make. I need to add an action item that has no material to go with it regarding a potential change to our employee handbook.
Okay. You do have the list of next meetings. Your packet. We do have a quorum fairly. Jim is joining us by internet. Are there any public comments? We do not have our child care and housing manager or pipeline trustee liaison, but we do have Trustee Brown sitting in, and I think he'll be able to report on where we are. Is there any approval of the changes to minutes from our last meeting? Motion. A motion to approve. And a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. There we go. Motion passes unanimously. Action item. Scott, you want to talk about the employee manual? Good morning, Jessica.
Yes, so thank you all for entertaining the late revision for this action item. It was not anticipated necessarily to become an item. The employee handbook, in my mind, is a little bit of a gray area for the EPHA board. We have had board member input in the past for our employee handbook. In my mind, it is more of an operational item, and our manual does need to be completely revamped. However, we have run into a circumstance where I may seek to change our employee manual based on some of our open positions and how some of those interviews went. So our employee manual in one section states that we do not hire family members of those already employed by EPHA. And we don't need to go through the list of why that policy is. It makes sense. It defines and outlines what a family member is. And there are also stipulations in our employee handbook that talk about employment of family members, board members as well. But in this case, I'm just talking about the section that discusses of family members that it currently prohibits. I think from my perspective, I would like to potentially change that policy in our handbook prior to a larger rewrite, which is on the task list to begin work on. To, again, pending legal discussions and with our legal counsel and other HR expertise to allow, with certain parameters and frameworks, the employment of family members, of course, acknowledging and making sure that there are no conflicts of interest. There's not a direct reporting structure. Family members are not involved in any of the hiring decisions, any of those sort of very obvious about front potential conflicts. So my proposal here today, we could go a couple different routes. It's one, I'd like to hear the board's opinion on potentially changing that policy to loosen it. And I skipped right over reasons why I would potentially want to make a change. We live in a smaller community, and that results in a smaller labor pool. And some of our positions have been difficult to fill in the past with qualified candidates. In this most current round of hiring, we ran into a circumstance which the hiring manager acknowledged very early on that the mere application, one of our applicants that we received is a family member of someone currently employed by EPHA. So that would go against our policy. My direction, given the labor pool that we have and the applicants that we've received, was continue the process, acknowledging that exists, but the family member that's employed by EPHA has no direct role in any of the decision making during the hiring, and no interview responsibility. So my direction was continue the process with the candidate. We will see where the candidate lands. If it becomes an item of concern, i.e. meaning if this candidate nears the top of our potential job offer list, so to speak, then we'll address it at that point. We are at that point now. So I've drafted a policy that I have yet to run by legal counsel because I wanted to have the conversation with you all, gauge your opinion on a couple things. One, how you view staff's ability to change our employee handbook without or with board input. And then two, my direct action and request this morning would be, and then your conversation and your input would be to allow staff to potentially change the handbook after consulting with appropriate HR and legal representation. Hopefully that frames it decently.
Comments?
I don't, personally, I don't have a problem with it. Again, going through what Scott has said, no direct reporting, no interchange. I worked for a big company. My wife also worked for that company, you know. And again, legally counsel, HR, the police there. And I agree with Scott, we do have a small potential employee base here in this part. And if we find a qualified individual and he or she happens to be related to an employee, existing employee, but that person can fill what we're looking for and has the qualifications, I'm okay. Daisy?
I'm also okay with having family members within a company as long as they don't directly report to their family member or they're not in the same department.
Jim, any comments here before?
Is my mic on?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
No, I would just reiterate exactly what Pete and Stacy just said. I'm in agreement with that viewpoint.
That gives you your direction. I would suspect this board would probably want to review the employee handbook once it's before it's formally adopted. But I don't think that there's an issue. Spousal employee.
Our manual allows that, but doesn't allow other family relationships. So this, I think, is this gives me, I think, what I need to make the requisite changes with the appropriate parameters to before a full, more robust rewrite of the employee handbook, so they can.
Okay. Any comments from the our public audience? Today's an action item. We'll move on. 16 cash flow statement.
So as is normal, provided the most recent cash flow statement in your packets, along with I think 2 supporting documents. It is not fully reconciled. It is fully reconciled through April 30th. As you know, our books tend not to be finalized for the prior month until around the 13th or 15th of the month. So that sort of puts some pressure on when I can fully reconcile against the bank. Because I'm still doing that work as sort of an accountant for this. But what is updated is collections. So I think year to date, 60 is up. I think it's about 11.7%. No, I'm not feeling. It's somewhere in that ballpark. Sorry, I don't have the number off the top of my head. But again, we're still not heavy collection months. So the year is off to a good start, but still got collection months to.
Bill is giving us a reminder, please put your phone on silent. Or like, thank you, Bill, for that reminder. Vince mentioned that. It's not an agenda item. Right. So it skips my attention, so thank you for pointing that out. That's very beneficial for the entire piece. Thank you.
Happens to the best of us. Other than that, there have not been any substantive changes to the cash flow over the last few months. Any questions that I may answer?
Talking about financial issues, I understand the reconciliation here, the 60 funds and the library. 45 days. Mentioned it. For of the need to start seeing some bills that are being paid. And I think that was something that was going to occur as we move to this.
Yeah, I don't know that we talked about it in open meeting, but you and I did speak about that. And I have no problem adding that into the board packet, similar to what the town does.
Yeah.
Currently, there are technology limitations, as we're aware of. So I think shortly after, it might take a month or two, and then take a month or two after we convert to ERD before we can add that in more comfortable with format information. But one of the benefits of ERD is it is extremely robust platform on the financial side of the world. So that should be a relatively simple and easy request. That shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. That and really will help. Dr. Frank, Carly, being here. And as there was just a reminder before you came in to put your phones on silent. No reminder. Updates, Fall River Village.
Oh, first I want to apologize to you all. You are stuck with me today. If you notice, Mr. Levine is traveling today, and so you're stuck with me getting these updates. For Fall River Village, we will be in front of town board for approval of the amended PUD next Tuesday. And once we receive approval for the amended PUD, part of that approval will be conditional on some firewall work, separation work that has to happen in the attic of a few of the buildings up top, due to sort of the complexity of the truss work and access and all of those issues. A couple of buildings, the simplest path forward, as awkward as it is to cut the roof open and enter from the roof. So assuming we get that approval of the amended PUD, we will immediately begin that work to make those changes to the attic firewall areas where we need to do that work. And then we'll proceed with the business plan for 7 units. The fish hatchery has hit a little bit of a roadblock as we have honed in on the infrastructure needs. So we continue to work with the town on how their parcel how we can serve that parcel with adequate water. So there are several different options. We've had a robust conversations. It is certainly a point of frustration for us at the moment, getting this far along and sort of hitting a little bit of a roadblock. But that is part and parcel what comes with pre-development. You have to get to a certain stage before you can make some of the determinations, how utilities can best serve the site. And that's sort of where we are. So in the long run, we still believe the site can be served with water, just sort of which engineering path, and of course the associated upfront capital costs, ongoing operating costs, and their long-term capital costs for the various solutions, and what sort of fits the water department's operating model and all those factors. We continue to work on that with the town, and I think over the coming months we'll have some information to share.
Yeah, I'm concerned, how has changed when it's required after October, in terms of its ability to, its desire as to what the rules need. I also have some questions on, where fish hatchery might stand in relationship to somewhat $100 million upgrade of the water treatment system in that particular chute for upgrading all of it. So, another question on that, on Fall River Village as well. Who has paid the costs thus far for the development work that's been done? It is now on hold.
Fish hatchery or Fall River Village?
For fish hatchery.
For fish hatchery, all pre-development expense has been coming from the $2 million grant that Larimer County provided to add affordability to that specific project.
Okay. So it's not coming out of the town coffers. It's not coming out of the house coffers. In relationship to the expenses. That's similar question along with things, but let's go on to 30 Moraine Avenue.
By way of reminder, we are under contract to purchase 830 Moraine Avenue, more commonly known as Tiny Town. So we're beginning heavy due diligence as we close in on our original anticipated closing date of September 30th of this year. As Pete has given you many updates over the last few months, we did formally submit another land banking application. I think this was our third. We've been denied twice on other parcels. That doesn't stop us from trying. We are cautiously optimistic that we could receive an award based on several factors, but that caution comes from the fact that we have the source of those funds is Prop 123. And we did receive for Fall River Village a $7 million equity investment. So they like to spread those funds out geographically across the state. So that's where our caution comes in, even though we believe we have a very good potential site to fill our housing needs with that site. We are in a position to complete the acquisition, even if we don't receive that award, but obviously that award to complete the purchase of Tiny Town will go a long way.
How much is that award?
We asked for the full purchase price. Don't hold me to this number because I don't have it off the top of my head. It's somewhere around 3.4 million. We are taking as many lessons learned as we can from all of our previous developments, including our pre-development work on fish hatchery. And this, as you've heard Pete or I speak about ad nauseum at times, about pre-development is the most riskiest part of any development. You don't know what you don't know, and you have to get it to a certain point before you know what you need to know to be able to try to have a development approved for construction and all of that. All the nuances involved. We have engaged Steve Lane, who I think this board is familiar with, to help us with some pre-development conceptual work for 830 Moraine, to try to give us some base, layouts, numbers that a traffic engineer could also give us some. We're concerned that CDOT would require us to make substantial changes to a nearby intersection based on previous communications we have had with them. I am not as fearful as Keith of that, because the change that any proposed development will bring to that site in terms of, or that intersection in terms of traffic volume would be probably 0.1% of current traffic volumes. But oftentimes the last one to the game is the one that shoulders responsibility, even if an intersection has been non-compliant for CDOT standards for years. So we're concerned about that. And a few other infrastructure related pieces. We just want to make absolutely sure that the site presents us with no large surprises to the degree possible. So we're investing a little bit of money up front before we normally would to get some of those answers, hopefully, as part of our due diligence work before we get too much further. Any questions on 830 Moraine?
I have a question about the life state and how that's anticipated to be given. If life, for those of you who are not aware, there is a life estate at Huntingtown for one of Mitchell's sons, who was previous owner of that particular thing, for was purchased by the no, we have an inkling as to how that's going to be handled. We're talking about the redevelopment of that.
Derek, I would have to go back and check our last communication with both the seller's legal counsel and ours, but I believe all life estates have expired.
That is, no, that's not true.
Okay.
The life estate which there were 3 life estates. One for each brother and one for the daughter. The other brother has moved and has a life estate at Beaverbrook. The daughter has moved and is no longer interested and has divested herself as part of that life estate. It's the other brother that still, I believe, is in Huntingtown in the life estate. So if we could follow up on that, just get some more information. Certainly it would be, if I'm wrong, then that's good as well. But I think we need to make sure that that life estate for the brother who lived there, be one of the units, and also add the, I believe, storage shed on site. That we are back and we're what's happening there.
I'll follow up, but I believe that, again, my memory says that it was all resolved.
I think the issue was resolved. Those people who no longer were part of that.
I'll follow up.
Thank you. Okay. When do we anticipate a hearing on the license? Attorney Moore.
Okay. We would not be pursuing life tech.
No, I'm sorry, just the funding on 830, right? It's from the state.
I believe it was outlined in the memo that Pete provided. We expected, CHAP originally expected, I think, in early July. But none of the applicants, Pete has direct contact with a couple other applicants. We have not received any word, so we anticipate any day potentially, but we don't know exactly where we are.
In July, it's come dry.
It has, I would agree.
Maybe early August. Sometimes. Page 3. We have about 5 minutes. Clean Street. Page 5. Clean Street presentation, I believe, is outdoors of the conversation that, or the thing I had with the architects for Livingston. And showing where Cleave Street or any of the Cleave Street, how those would be essentially, you know, over terms of the tenants with their with that particular area. How they rebuild.
No, we will be receiving a presentation at 9. I think it's Tina has joined the call, so in a few minutes we'll transition to a presentation by Williams architect who has, conceptualized some ideas of what the site could look like in a joint project between the town, EPHA, and Williams to sort of re-envision those 3 separately owned parcels to better use the combination of land.
Did you want to talk about the density study?
Certainly. So last Tuesday, the town held a study, it was a study session, right?
Yeah.
Regarding housing definitions and how we define affordability, workforce. So we had what I thought was a productive study session that housing child care manager Stephen ran. He produced all the material for it. It was great. You did, I want to tell you this in public, you did a fabulous job of pulling all that material, which was really years of conversation about how it all works, what leads to creating additional housing. And I thought Carly did a fabulous job of presenting that material, both in your memo and in the presentation. Pete and I joined virtually to hopefully provide. I think audio was a little funny, so we didn't say a whole lot. But again, I think the board had a pretty substantive, robust conversation about their ideas and thoughts on how we define and what ultimately I think the goal is. The joint goal is what can lead to and spur additional housing units in the areas that our community needs. That's the underlying question. The underlying goal is, are we producing housing that our community needs, and how best do we support that? So I think both town staff and EPHA received a fair amount of guidance in that will give us some good fodder to go back and come back with some concrete proposals of what could be worked into a revised development code. And as part of that presentation, Pete had done some research on other communities in Colorado specifically that have a similar sort of feel and makeup, population size to Estes Park, and presented what is in front of you in the memo, sort of their base densities and how those compare to this currently in our community. So, anything that either of you, Carly or Frank, want to add to that?
I think just as far as next steps and what that looks like, we have our consultants are presenting on the 50% development code updates on the 28th. And there's opportunity for the public to participate in that. There's some outreach that's going on and feedback, public comment on that 50% draft. And then we'll take information that was received from the board from not only the study session, but also from public comment and the 50% draft to go back to the consultants and hopefully incorporate all of that in the development code updates and final draft later this winter, early spring. I think there's some optimism around getting that there by the end of the year. So that'll all be incorporated. There wasn't anything that I think requires additional time to incorporate. So it's really all incorporated in that draft.
I thought one of the things that surprised me when they mentioned that there's only 2 vacant RM zone parcels left in the town.
Yes.
I think that's over 3 acres.
Okay.
It's still pretty narrow, so I think, can't speak for the board, but I think expanding some of these things to other zones besides the RMs or some of the incentives makes sense. If we're starting to physically be limited, no matter what our incentives are, we only have that much land, we only have that much land. Incentives on property that doesn't exist doesn't help us. I think we'll be looking at those kind of things. Also, how low our base density was compared to other places was kind of it was good data to put into perspective.
Yeah, it was good, good presentation.
I also think with the public, we need more of this. It's the pictures to show what does this density look like. Because when you say, 10 units per acre, the things that people have in their mind, people can't conceive that very well. And so seeing things that you see that and said, wow, that really looks pretty good. There's lots of open space. I think it looks good. It's not wall to wall tenements with no green space and concrete. So I think the more we do that kind of thing, get those visual representations, that was very.
Yeah, and thank you, to the team and also to Scott for your input. During that. I know that's from both ways. Conference, appreciate your participation in that.
David, can you hear us? We're ready to turn it over to you. You should be able to present as well.
Hi, yeah, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yes. I guess can go ahead and share my screen then, but just a little introduction and background about myself. I'm Ava Amir Mahdi. I'm with International Architects Atelier. We have been working with Whimsidoodle Inc. for the last year and a half, kind of helping them with visioning some of their internal projects. I don't know how well if you all know Walt Dietrich, but we know him from his previous time in Kansas City. That was how we originally got connected, and through him kind of got involved with Whimsidoodle Inc. We have been working with Whimsidoodle, the town, as well as the Estes Park Housing Authority to kind of think about and dream about what could happen on Cleve Street, in the potentiality that we merge these three properties together to create kind of one more cohesive multi-use development that can better activate and bring activity and commerce and community to Cleve Street. So with that, I'll go ahead and share. We shared this presentation back in, Walt presented this in a town public meeting back in February. So some of you may have already seen some of the proposal. And I just also want to preface this by saying this is really a preliminary concept design. It was really a challenge to us as the design team. The housing authority currently has 10 units in your existing building. Then the town had this proposal to build a parking garage that would, with the need to achieve 122 total parking spaces. And then Whimsidoodle had their adjacent property just to the west of the housing authority's property. And they have been dreaming about bringing more art workshops, artist spaces to Cleve Street. And so our challenge is, okay, if we have all of these pieces of land, what can we achieve so that we don't have just like a large parking garage sitting on the corner of Cleve Street and Bighorn? I'll kind of walk through the plans. I know your perspective is particularly, you have an interest in the housing part of this development, but I'll kind of walk through it all. And then at the end, first, please feel free to interrupt if you have questions along the way, but I'll also make sure we have time at the end to discuss. And I want to make sure we get to hear any of your thoughts about the development as well. So what we have been looking at is how can we really achieve the parking that the town wanted in their parking garage design, but so that it's not visible from Cleve Street at all. As I mentioned, the town was looking at gaining 120 parking spaces. With our concept study, we believe we can gain approximately 150. So matching, slightly exceeding the town's goals. The way we're doing this is by kind of pushing the parking back behind on the back side of the development. And so that way the front of the development facing Cleve Street and on the corner of Bighorn is really an activated social city space. In the corner, we want to have we're envisioning a mini plaza, allowing for some more kind of either food and beverage or some sort of retail or performance space that could kind of have a welcoming corner. You know, if you're down on the main intersection on Moraine, you look up the street, you see that there's some activity happening and want to kind of continue down Cleve Street. And then having a series of retail or potential, and with the focus on more kind of local retailers, not any chains or that type of thing. We want to really keep this Estes Park focused and centric, and that's kind of the goal of Whimsadoodle with this kind of part of the development, especially with more art focused, potentially gallery spaces or an artist workshop space, that type of activity on Cleve Street. Moving up on the second floor, this is an all parking level. So this will be the main parking level for most of the public to come and park and be able to access downtown Estes Park. And one thing that I wanted to actually add on the first level is that by providing this entrance approach, we were able to have all delivery, trash, everything happen behind the scenes. So it's not visible on Estes Park, and it's kind of happening in the back of house area, and you don't have like dumpsters lining Cleve Street. Then we get to move up to the third floor, and this is where it's really the housing floor. In your current building on Cleve Street, you have 10 total apartments, I believe, 8 one-bedroom, 1 two-bedroom, and 1 efficiency unit. We have flexibility here to play around with the type of unit size and proportions, but what you're seeing in this current floor plan, the breakdown is that we have achieved 15 total units. 8 of them are studio units, 3 of them are 1-bedroom units, 2 of them are 2-bedroom units, and then 2 of them are artist units to support Whimsadoodle's vision. So that means that's 13 out of the 15 apartments would be for the housing authority. And as I mentioned, there is flexibility that if the balance of studio versus 1 or 2 bedrooms can shift, we have a limited amount of square footage. So if we start to err on the side of larger units, we might not get the whole 13 units. It might be more like 11 or 12, but we would be able to exceed the number of units that you currently have in your existing building. And then on the upper level, we have another parking area for the public. We did want to highlight this green roof barrier. As actually, I didn't really highlight it below, but especially for the units that are facing Cleve Street, which is the majority of the units, we are providing a private balcony, and we wanted to make sure that there's a sense of privacy and there aren't just the public walking up to the edge of the parking lot and just peeking over the balcony. So we've provided this green barrier at the edge. This section is non-accessible by anybody. So that way there is a privacy buffer for the units below. And we've carved out an area of it. What the size of this kind of accessible part is also flexible. but to provide a dedicated resident garden. So that would be a private space only for the residents to utilize as they want, fully open, open air, and allow them to have kind of that dedicated private green space as well available to them. And this is a diagram kind of better exemplifying that green buffer that I was talking about. So on the third level, as I said, there's the residential units, and then there's the private balcony, and then you have this green buffer that wouldn't be accessible, or on the west side, there would be the resident garden. So that way you have that separation between the public and the units below. This is just, these are just test layouts of what each of the units could look like. The studio, the 1-bedroom, and the 2-bedroom units. This is the artist unit as well for your reference. Really focusing on creating kind of open living spaces. Again, as I said, these are concepts, so we're open to any feedback that you all have on what you have been seeing with what your tenants are looking for. But just wanted to kind of test fit our units to prove that they're kind of comfortable, right-sized living spaces. And then this one is a new view that I don't think anybody has seen before, but we thought that it would be especially helpful for you all to kind of get an idea of what one of these units might look and feel like. As I said, again, this is early concept design. It's what the actual finishes are, what the actual look is of the space is still flexible, but really we wanted to highlight the windows out to the balcony and how you have these beautiful sweeping views beyond to the valley to the south and of downtown Estes Park. And then just from a standing out from more of the public context, this is a concept view of what that elevation of Cleve Street could look like. So as you can see, the parking is truly fully covered. It's really about creating these activated street front areas. You have your private balconies for the units, and then that green buffer on the upper level. And we're really trying to keep the ethos of Estes Park. We don't want this to feel like this one giant development that just got plopped in. We really wanted to still have that feel of downtown Estes Park, where these individual buildings that have come together organically over time. And we're really trying to make sure that we continue that feel on Cleve Street as well. We don't want Cleve Street to have this other, like, oh, this is a new part of downtown or a different part of downtown. And this is kind of a street perspective of what the development could potentially look like. And then for that corner element, which is still under design, but really we see it as the real attractor point for Cleve Street. You know, we have our main intersection and kind of using it as a counterbalance to the tower of Historic Park Theater. And so we've been thinking about how we can create this open, welcoming public space, have some outdoor seating, maybe have a little coffee shop or some sort of food stand to allow for an indoor-outdoor experience, and then also allow the public to have access to a viewpoint out over downtown Estes Park and the valley. And that's kind of the summary of what we've been dreaming about could happen at Cleve Street and Bighorn Drive. I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have. I'm sure there's something I missed in going through all of that, but would love to hear what you all think.
It appears, excuse me, well thought out, and I like the idea of all the parking, all the trash, all that behind the scenes. Because we have the opportunity to plan. You're seeing the storefronts, you're seeing the housing, the garden, and I think that's a well thought.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we see that as a great opportunity. Right now, Cleve Street feels like a little bit of a back of house alley, with particularly the south side of Cleve Street being the back side of these buildings, and wanting to kind of enhance the character and street frontage of what Cleve Street can be.
Stacy,
I'm wondering, like, timeline wise, what this looks like. Like, where are you at in your process? What's the next steps?
Yeah, so I will say that I may not be the best person to answer that question, but I can tell you a little bit about immediate next steps. So we had I forgot to mention, we had our first series of public workshops on June 30th, where we got some great feedback from members of the town and the public on what they have, what their dreams are, what their fears are about what is happening on Cleve Street. And so we are going to have a follow-up public presentation on July 30th, back again at the community center, at noon and at 5 p.m. I believe flyers should be being distributed now, or you should receive them shortly, hopefully. And at that one, we have kind of taken all the data that we collected, and we will be sharing kind of the results of what we learned and heard. And we'll be making, so this was, as I mentioned, this was kind of the concept that we had back in February. We're going to be making some adjustments to these visuals that you see based on the feedback we heard on June 30th. Again, this is still all very early concept design, so it's still going to evolve and change, especially when we start to bring engineers and all the kind of design members on board to really get into the nitty-gritty of how to build this development. But in terms of long-term timeline, we have, as the architects, we've not been privy to kind of the conversations between the three entities to know about what is the kind of bigger agreement and when that will be in place, so that we can actually start the formal design process. I can't give you the answer to that. I don't know if Scott or somebody else from the town or Whimsidoodle might be able to give you guys a better update at a future date and time.
Ava, thank you very much for that. Covering it very well. I don't know that we have another meeting yet on the books, but one of the primary drivers for this, of course, is what the legal framework or potential legal framework would look like. And then, of course, right behind that is then what funding mechanisms based on that legal framework could then be employed to make this happen and financially feasible for our parties involved. So that's where the substantive work outside of this architectural, conceptual, and community relations piece has been focused on. And Whimsidoodle and EPHA is using the same legal counsel that we've both had been represented by legal counsel for years at this point. And so I did waive privilege for that. So our legal counsel is working on other similar frameworks that he's used in the past that could be employed here. So I anticipate over the next handful of months or sooner, we'll have some subsequent meetings with present back to this board sort of the direction that we think it could be used.
And then when might we see some of the changes that are made from the feedback from the public?
Yeah, we're giving that update on July 30th. So if you're able to attend either of the workshops, as I said, at noon or at 5 p.m. on July 30th, we'll be giving updates then. Yeah. And
for the EPHA board, I will publicly notice that meeting so that more than 2 of you can attend, so that you all can attend if you want to attend that.
Jim, any questions?
Frank,
With all the stuff going on with Whimsidoodle and all this really refinancing, has there been any discussions about bringing back the URA? I know there's been there's been water, under the bridge for this for quite a while now, and a URA with all this development to recapture some of that increment. to fund some of this and other improvements downtown. It's got great potential. I don't know if the community's ready for that yet again, but it's been a long time since we threw it out. I know we're one of the few communities, if not the only one, that it would have to go to a vote. But URA is a great tool. This is a good example of this. What's going on Police Street, what's going to go on with the theater. So,
For those of you who are maybe not familiar with the jargon of URA.
thank you, sir.
It is Urban Renewal Authority. Estes Park had an Urban Renewal Authority for 25 years that redeveloped the downtown from, I believe it was almost out to West Park Center, all the way down to corner down there, and also included Stanley Village. It's funded by, I think, 0.25% sales tax.
No, URAs are strictly funded by the increment.
The
Increment. It takes the base level of what the property value was before development. Whatever that increment is, that change because of the improvement, like here, goes up. That change goes to the URA for funding for a certain period of time. At the end of the URA, that tax revenue that goes back to the taxing entity, like the school district. But the idea is to kind of to get that increment. It's all done by tax increment finance.
And it would have to be voted on by citizens.
But there's no tax increase for any citizen. It's just that increment goes to the improvement. Yeah, it would have to be voted on.
To answer,
Has there been any discussion?
it's been mentioned, but we haven't had substantive conversation about that angle yet.
I would like to maybe push that
Okay.
a little bit, because once the development's done and the increment's there, it's gone.
Right.
Now, I know some of the other taxing entities, in fact, I was on the other side of the street, locally at the county for a long time, where URAs, and I do think were abused. But we would never have had the Riverwalk and some of the art, some of the things that we have here without the URA. It made such a difference to us.
Yeah, the park behind it's a dirt parking lot with a couple of shacks on it. It's now where it's and a bunch of our wooden sidewalks were replaced. And treescapes were added. And streets were sewer, water lines were upgraded. So that it's a significant amount of it. It's like, say, $18 million was spent on that during those 25 years. I have one additional question, and I'll let you know. I appreciate the update. My concern has been residential units, parking lot in terms of exhaust fumes and the disturbance of the residential inhabitants, in particular with apartments above a bigger parking garage. The question is there any way to mitigate some of those issues? That we know of?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of kind of maintaining the wellness and the health of the interior apartment units, first of all, the units, as you saw in the plan, are facing the south side. All of the parking is mostly focused on the north side, and all the kind of parking garages need to be aired out, open to the air for venting. That's why you see parking garages just generally are open air. All of that will be happening on the north side of the development, so that way the fumes are like the general kind of exhaust of the garage isn't happening in the direction of the apartment units. Also, the parking on the units on the apartment, the housing level on level 3, those that parking will be only for the tenant, so it will be limited kind of car activity happening on that level. It'll be private parking for the tenant area, and there's also a corridor. There's a circulation corridor, kind of community area buffer zone between the parking and the units themselves. And then I would say the third kind of level of this is Scott and Whimsadoodle had let us know that they want to try have these units meet passive house standards, which is really exciting for me. I used in my, not to get too into my personal life, but I used to work for a Norwegian architecture firm in my early career, and they were pioneers in passive house. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to work on a passive house project. But for those of you who may not know, they have really stringent building regulations that basically create a super tight envelope enclosure. So that way you kind of create this like very sealed living area. So it has an even higher level of kind of protection from the exterior elements than a typical construction that you might see has.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
Thanks for that added context at the end. That we can geek out on building science together someday.
Yeah, no, I am so excited when Walt first mentioned that you had wanted to achieve passive house with this. I was like, great. I'm ready to dive into it. So
Thank you very much for your time and your efforts. We look forward to interaction to see how we can improve the lives and the environment of Fleet Street. So thanks for your time.
all right. Thank you all again. Really appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Okay.
Just one more item, before we move on to item number 3. Capital needs assessments have all been completed. So Pete and Jessica walked around with them and facilitated the on-site CNA. So we anticipate receiving those reports back for the 5 properties that we did. And that will begin to inform where our capital investment needs to be focused, and all of our various assets that are at that point in their cycle. That's it for development.
Okay.
My report will be fairly short, and so compliance with workforce housing, non-EPHA workforce housing was a pretty time-consuming aspect of June, late May through early July, I would say, and so got to have some really rich conversations with process on how to handle some of the non-compliant issues that I was running into. Fortunately, those rectified themselves. Those residents that were non-compliant ended up moving out, and were able to move in compliant residents. And so thankfully we didn't have to go down a little bit more of a headache path than we thought we were going to have to. And just as a reminder, we are not the enforcement entity. The town of Estes Park is. So we just had great conversation. Carly and I, and then code enforcement officer Jesse. Yeah, and so great conversation there. Then the only other one that I wanted to focus on was the workforce rental assistance program. We continue to get surges of applications. The interesting thing about applications that are coming in is employment is changing really, really fast, like even in the midst of them applying. And so the approval process is taking a little bit longer for some individuals than it usually does because of those changes, also moving. And so I learned something new every day, and that challenge has taken a little bit more time when it comes to the approval process for the rental assistance program, but we're very fortunate to be able to help out over 60 households with the rental assistance program. If you recall, our goal was, I believe, 32 households we were hoping to serve in 2026, and we've almost doubled that at this point. And then the Trailhead Homeownership Down Payment Assistance Program, we're very close to launching, so we're excited about that. We will have a meeting on marketing and just the announcement of the program here pretty soon. Once we get a couple of final details ironed out, then we're excited to go live with that. Within X number of days. So end of July, maybe early August. So
Can I add one comment to that?
absolutely.
I'm not gonna remember the specifics, which is unfortunate, but there are now 2 other programs in the state. There might even be a third, actually, as I say this out loud, that almost exactly mirror what we created for the Trailhead down payment experience.
It isn't. Homeowner finance.
The Trailhead down payment assistance program, I can talk today. So that was just exciting that others in this space are seeing what's worked, what hasn't, and trying to come up with something that better fits the current market. And there are small differences between the programs, but they're relatively minuscule. They're all essentially the same or similar programs. And at least one of those in the state will be also administered by Impact Development Fund or IPF. That's going to administer all the program. So that was sort of encouraging to see that we're not out there on our own doing something completely new and unique. It is new, but it is no longer unique to us. So we're excited to go live with that and see how you can use it. Thank you for letting me in.
Of course. Yeah.
I have a question before we move on from the workforce rental assistance program. If we look at the average rent versus monthly gross income, you've got folks that are paying nearly 50% of their income for something different. And how we can impact that unless we decide funding to that particular program. Because we're supposed to be someplace in the neighborhood 30 to 32%. It's a concern. It affects quality of life for people who are paying for their housing thing like it should be. Listen, I have a question, Joe. The amount of money, let's just take household A. So let's say they're doing $1,904, the average rent that they're getting. Allergies are bad this year. The amount of money, how is that calculated? In other words, is the amount, let's just hypothetically say that they're paying 48% of their incomes. Do we bring it down to 33? How do we determine the amount?
Sure. So the household has has 2 options. And so they can either utilize the funding for their security deposit and first month's rent up to $4,800, or they can choose the option for $400 a month to offset their monthly cost. And so they choose that, it's for the duration of their lease. And then if they renew their lease, they have to reapply.
Okay. So in this case, they chose $400 a month. And if we bring it down to 1,504, then you divide that by their income. It's 36% of 7. It reduces it.
Go ahead, Cece.
What is the percentage of people who choose to have down payment or first month's rent versus the monthly?
It's about 95% choose the monthly distribution. And then we do have a handful that choose the security deposit and first month's rent. So typically it's a conversation that not only Crossroads has with the applicant initially, but once I get involved to do the approval process, just to make sure that they understand that, help them understand what their finances are, what the best course of actions.
And there's general budgeting and like financing courses available through Crossroads too. So when they're applying for that, they'll get additional support if they are, 50% is going toward their rent or something like that. There's other resources to kind of help them through budgeting.
I can provide a couple additional stats and then I want to touch on your question, your point, which is important. So what you see on the second page of the memo, I believe, regarding average rent 1904, annual gross income, and then monthly income, those are correct me if I misstate this, Jim. So those are pre-assistance numbers.
Correct.
So the average, and that is an average, not a median. Derek, to your point, is so we'll round up to 48% of their gross income is going toward rent alone. Post assistance, that comes down to 43.5. So to your point, still missing the ideal mark of floating around that 30% mark. The 400 in monthly assistance, should they choose that option, is the equivalent when paired against the rent income to rent ratio of adding $16,000 in income. So those households that take it for the monthly assistance. That was where we originally landed with the program and an amount that we felt was appropriate. I want to highlight philosophically one of the reasons this was the first program, and in my mind, one of the most important first steps that we did after 6C, and that was in absence of adequate, affordable, lower income units, the largest impact that we can have is providing direct rental assistance. That is largely what the largest amount of federal dollars go to in terms of housing choice vouchers or project-based vouchers. And this is sort of a mini microcosm of that. In the absence of other restricted units that get an affordability ratio that lower income folks need, the best way that you can do that is with direct assistance. That's why this program exists. As you heard me say, I think last month, it is vitally important that community understands and knows that this program is available. That's why we made increased marketing pushes and why we, I think, see increased applications. We have more than adequate funding in the program budget to fund this based on community need largely. That need continues to be there to where the community needs an injection of affordability for our workforce. This is here to help support that. We can also come back and have another conversation about if that $400 remains appropriate based on those stats and how the program is performing and what's available not only in the market, but what incomes are in the market. We can have that conversation about if that $400 a month needs to be tweaked, what that could mean. I would offer one point of caution in that as we do monitor things because one concern that we had going into this was there does exist the potential that the private rental market could sort of artificially inflate rent amounts if that assistance is here. So you could be chasing your tail in this and it really just lining pockets of private landlords to that degree. So there is a fine balance in there somewhere. I'm not saying 400 is that sweet spot. It may not be, but we can poke at the edges on that too.
That's it.
Yep.
Okay, so
I think we're on to Jessica operating.
So I'm also pretty quick on the reports we're heavy into audit season right now. We have 2 currently active at Falcon Ridge. So the the CHAPA audit and the preferred compliance audit is happening simultaneously. So what Heidi does behind the scenes and what I do is we send them a rent roll, they pick a file, or they pick 10 files, and then we have to send them documents back saying, proving that we're doing everything in compliance, income qualifying people to move into that property specifically. So we submitted those files 2 nights ago, Heidi and I, and then they'll send back any findings that they find. We have our physical inspection at that property tomorrow. And then the following week, preferred compliance will be here to do another physical inspection at Falcon Ridge. And then we had our CHAPA inspection at Fall River Village Lower. So that's another one that we're under compliance for the average income restrictions over that property. So that went really well. The write-up was, this was once a resort property and now it's workforce and it's beautiful. And there were really no findings around the property for the physical audit. They just gave us, we just uploaded documents last night for that property for CHAPA. Sorry, there's a lot of CHAPAs or the C's. So CIRSA, I did a walkthrough. CIRSA is our insurance company that also goes through with the town as well. So we do an annual walk across all of our properties, and they just kind of point out anything that they would recommend. Hey, this brick is loose. Why don't you tighten it up to just decrease our insurance and everything? And so I did that across all of our properties last week. And again, very, very few minor recommendations. We do a really good job across our properties dealing with safety and our residents and our employees. I miss anything on? Do you have questions on any of the audits or inspections? That's just what's taking up a lot of my time right now. The team's doing great. Danny and Claire have jumped in, and we're very fast learners. And we're about a month and a half in with restructuring the property assignments. So I think I had mentioned it 2 months ago. I wasn't here last month, but Heidi now takes the east side of our properties, which is Talents Point, Grand Estates, and Falcon Ridge. And then Claire's taking the central properties, Peakview Pines, Lone Tree, and then Marla's taking the west side properties, Cleve Street, Fall River Village, and Beaver Brook. So it's really made it a good even amount of all property managers are responsible for 3 properties, and it seems to be working out really well with them. And I did want to recognize, I did tell the team last week or yesterday in our all staff meeting that I would just recognize their hard work here today with you all, that they're not just checking the boxes of their responsibilities. They go above and beyond to our residents, especially when one resident's going through a hard time financially or with personal things or mental health, or whatever reasons. We as an organization go above and beyond to give them the resources that they need to keep them housed. And we've just been, I just wanted to recognize that to our staff and to the board here, that they put their heart and soul into this organization, and I appreciate it every single day. You're welcome.
A couple quick add-ons. We said we go through this every year, and I think the board is familiar with this. But some members of the public may not be. EPHA and all of our housing products that we offer and provide to the community, we operate in a very high compliance world. As Jessica just sort of outlined, most of our properties are audited at least once by an external source, if not 2 or 3 or 4 times. Depending on the property and the level of financing that went into it originally. So we are used to physical audits, file audits. There are a lot of hands in the pot because it's complicated to provide this housing. So every source is required to create an affordable unit wants to make sure that we're doing our jobs correctly. So this just highlights the high compliance environment that the team works in on a day-to-day basis. I want to, again, and just reiterate the tremendous work that everyone on the team is putting in. Growth is always difficult. It has been difficult for this organization. Will continue to be for some time. But we have a lot of the right pieces in the right places, and the team is doing an absolutely phenomenal job. And when it comes down to it, those that we serve in our community and our neighbors is really what the work is all about. We spend a lot of our time talking about sticks and bricks. You all heard me talk about that a lot. And it's really about the people that we're serving and we're providing safe, sanitary, and hopefully affordable housing to. And if it comes across someone's life potentially, undoubtedly, our team will have to deal with it as well, the good and the bad. And to highlight sort of the efforts that EPHA staff goes through, we have a resident at the bottom. So I think it's a relatively new resident, which is our one age restricted community, who is having difficulty and needs some additional support. And the team, I think primarily Jessica, ran into some roadblocks and trying to provide some additional assistance so that we can keep this individual housed. And we didn't like, I'm kind of talking for you now, but we didn't like the answers that we received from other community sources at a county level. And so we really reached out to all of our resources in the county, shared our experience, and I sort of set the alarm bell out there of, hey, this is a circumstance, something doesn't feel right. We shouldn't have to get to this point and put this person at risk of basically being homeless before someone in our assistance world can provide help. And I think we got some good additional resources. I don't know where that sits now, but
Yeah.
but these are the amount of effort that goes in behind the scenes to provide that effort assistance is quite tremendous and often goes unseen. So this recognition, when we say it often goes through, it's important, and I think it's important for the community to know that oftentimes what you see on the front side is just a sliver of what's actually going on behind the scenes to carry out the work that we do every day.
Of course, 330 plus units, 600 and some people around that have some minor and occasional difficulties. Doing that staff does a good job of problem solving. Couple of questions. Holds, my understanding that the Old River Village folks are real.
Yes. Yes.
Joe, how is it to keep up the swimming pool?
It's some work.
Yeah.
It's come along really well. We've really finalized things really well.
Yeah, again, Sarsa was in there, the insurance, like we had our audit in there, and any recommendations that they made last year, we've corrected. We've got eye washing stations in there and respiratory because we're dealing with chemicals and stuff. And so we had no write-ups on the pool of anything. Just said, good job, keep up the good work. On Fall River Village, Marla did want me to speak and say that at the end of this week, we will have approval we'll be at 100% occupancy at Fall River Lower. So that is very exciting news. And yeah, Marla did a great job getting us across that finish line. And so I just want to recognize her as well for doing that. And we're at
And
100%.
how's the J1 situation? All over the village.
Learning how to live internationally. Yeah, it's good. They're very excited. We got news of that everybody that, word is getting around that people that are living there want to come back next year and live there again. They want to possibly not work through an agency. It just comes straight to us. I haven't wrapped my head around that yet because it is a nice backstop to have that agency in place. But yeah, I just heard that news yesterday, and so I haven't quite
one of the questions that I had, at the last meeting was, we've got some master leases from, businesses that are leasing J1. Do you know how much those J1 students are being charged to live there through the master lease? If we're leasing one to $1,000 a month, XYZ business.
Yeah.
Is that them landlord charging for J1 students $500 a month to live there?
Yeah.
So it's, you know,
We don't have, it would be a conversation that I would have individually with that person about their wages and so I'll be happy to have those conversations and ask if they're comfortable sharing that information to us. So it's what we taken out of their wages for housing. Yeah.
Any other?
Sorry, I keep interjecting myself in the conversation. You guys are used to that. I want to highlight the amounts of seasonal and J1s that we've housed at Fall River Village. It's 13 units. 3 of the 13 are for international exchange students or J1s.
3 are under the program specifically. Yeah. Yeah.
There's more that are housed
Yeah.
without agents. And we also, Marla came to us with a request prior to my vacation, so I think on June 11th or maybe June 12th, the day I left, asking, as she kept receiving inquiries from a couple, I think 3 individuals at 2 different households who were housed in less than ideal circumstances on a seasonal basis. And so we were able to accommodate those through the normal process and provide them with better housing than they were otherwise receiving. So we've really stepped in this year to help fill a gap. And I had a conversation with another member of the community who's doing some work in the seasonal housing space. And these are this individual's words, not mine. But the words that he's heard shared are that EPHA is setting the gold standard for seasonal housing. So that was, of course, nice to hear on our behalf. And I shared those words with the team yesterday. It's good to receive your feedback.
Yeah. We thought that that's what we thought that document did, so it's good. Nice to hear from you. Yep. Okay. Anything else? Scott? Just for the very good.
No, nothing to add. We are, I guess I have one thing, but as we proceed and get closer to October, the Yardi ramp up gets a little bit more intense. Jeff and team have been doing a fabulous job of doing what's called UAT, is user acceptance training. So it's kind of this weird mismatch and combination of training and learning the system, but also testing the data that's in there and the processes. So carrying out work that you would otherwise carry out on a day-to-day basis to make sure that everything is sort of structured the way it needs to be. It works. So that those efforts just kind of will continue to ramp up along with the training until our anticipated go live date of October 1st.
October 1st.
Yeah. That will continue.
Okay. Anything from our legal counsel on the Supreme Court's relationship to Initiative 3?
Yes, we did receive, so the Supreme Court decision came down.
Yeah.
I'll use this phrase, it's not quite appropriate, but sort of in favor of not allowing inappropriate, I can't find the words today. It came down the way we expected it to, so it could have an impact on local 11, what is it, 25, thank you. I anticipate getting additional details from our legal counsel in the coming weeks and potentially a presentation of those findings and the potential impacts of that decision in August. Jim Martell is our legal counsel for that aspect. He's working on a few things for me simultaneously, 4 or 5 actually. So that is one of them that I hope to be able to provide a more substantive update coming months.
That's all that I have. Jim, anything else?
If we're just going around and having comments, I wanted to express my gratitude to Wendy. I thought the minutes from last month's meeting, the 8 pages, were very well done. And I also agree wholeheartedly with Jessica's comments about heart and soul and why we do what we do. And it's not just dollars and cents or highest and best use. It's real people with real families and situations and the need for good housing. And I'm proud to work with the group, and I do congratulate the staff because I think they do an amazing job with what they have to deal with.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. Carly.
Yes, real quickly, I've mentioned this a few times in our meetings, but we received a grant from DOLA to hire a group policy who conducted the first needs assessment back in 2023 to amend that to meet Prop 123 requirements as a community that's opted in. It just is a general requirement. We have to update that needs assessment. And so we have a draft of that. That is currently back with DOLA for a courtesy review, and then that will be available publicly soon for review. We're also going through the housing action plan, which is the additional requirement that we need to meet by the end of the year, which is essentially expanding upon the strategies that were presented as that needs assessment back in 2023, with the knowledge and know-how of where we're at today. So that's also underway. There's currently a survey available online that's going to provide feedback for that. We're also taking feedback and what we've learned from the code development update. That's going to be incorporated in the action plan. So if you're participating in either the development code updates or the annual 6E funding plan survey or outreach, that's going to be incorporated in this housing action plan. That will be available as part of DOLA requirements for public comment for 30 days. And so it'll be announced when that's available publicly. We'll have 30 days for the public to respond and give us feedback on that draft before that's submitted. So that should be done. That'll be available in August through September. So just wanted to provide that quick updated information. And as I mentioned, the 6E funding plan, we draft that every year. That is just proposed objectives for how we use 6E funds to address workforce housing and childcare the following year. And that's a requirement per our IGA with Larimer County. So to go through that process, and that's presented with the annual budget process this fall. It's just a super update.
A couple things. One, I had a question. The town has had to get an extension on our annual financial report. And the only reason is because of the size of this budget, the housing authority is a component part of our financial report. We're waiting for stuff from housing authority. So I was wondering what the status of that is and why there was such a delay. It doesn't look good for us to be not turning in our CalPER to the state as required by statute.
So I believe we're days away from the audit being put in the final review, which typically takes anywhere from 7 to 14 days from the audit firm. I have been beyond frustrated this year, as we were in this position last year, even later. And I expressed multiple times to both our team and our audit firm that it cannot happen again. And we need to execute and get our audit in on time so the town can submit theirs in an appropriate kind of fashion. We are where we are at the moment, just trying to shepherd it through. And I plan on having serious conversations with both the LHA accounting team and our auditing firm once it's complete. That this is kind of the final straw in my book. that in subsequent years, if we continue to use the current auditing firm, that we need to make the deadlines themselves, just that's a lot. I do anticipate, well, I do anticipate that overall, that process will be made easier with the conversion to ERE, because we were working in that dinosaur program, which I think you guys can relate to some degree. And I've recently converted yourselves to a new system, so I do anticipate a lot of improvement in that front, but we can't be in the situation again. And Penny and I have been in communication, and she understands how frustrated I am, and I've been doing everything I absolutely can to shut her down.
Thank you. So that, yeah, it's going on for this, multiple years. It's a problem, and I think for the board to know, conducting that financial audit is a big responsibility of the governing body.
And I think if we're not getting fool me once, shame on you, and fool me twice, shame on me, I think it may be time to reach out to other auditing firms and see what kind of action we can get, at what cost and time for that. Sort of like our annual report. You need to have that done. It's fine to but it's a situation where we need the results because we're not alone.
Anything else, Frank? Appreciate it. Yeah. Update on the interviews. We had 14 applications for the vacancies, which is great. It's a little concerned we weren't going to have enough. Now all of a sudden we got a bunch. The timing, it's going to get stretched out more than I'd like, but the board did appoint interview committee. They usually do take the liaison plus one more. So it's going to be myself and Trustee Heigl doing the interviews. However, the board has asked to have some discussion. A couple of the board members have asked to have some discussion about makeup and who's appointed to the board. There's some interest. I don't know how much in appointing a town trustee to the board officially, not just as a liaison. I think there's some philosophical discussion about the role of the interface between the town board and this board. I think there's a lot of difference among some of the trustees. I can tell you from my position, our role is to appoint people, but I think the legislature, when it set up the legislation, had in mind, I always think the legislature has some wise reasons for doing what they do. That might be useful thinking sometimes, but I think they do, and we need to honor that either way. That the whole legislation was set up that we would appoint a board, and then that board would be an independent board, function independently. And I agree with that personally. I think that's how it should be.
That's the way the state statute reads.
This statute reads, and it's intentionally, and that's how I think it should be. I think we are, in that case, other than appointing members to this board, we are peers in the community. I think it's done because this board can have certain expertise that the town board doesn't have, and specialize in housing. I think that's appropriate. There are other types of things like the library board is the same way. Not all the town board members agree with that. I think they might want to have that. So there's going to be a discussion. It was originally looking at it for next Tuesday. I think that's going to be postponed. I can't make next Tuesday's meeting, and I asked to be postponed to a meeting right before I was going to be. So we're going to discuss that on the 11th. I have talked with Trustee Heigl and the mayor. I think until the board gives us direction of how they want to appoint people to the board, it doesn't make sense for us to do interviews at this point. We'll probably screen the applications to get it done, but I expect the interviews would happen after the 11th. We move on from there, but I do want to do it as expeditious.
Is there any member housing on this interview process?
No,
And that's my question. I joined, there were members from the town and also those involved in the housing.
Yeah.
And I personally, I think it's wrong. I'll be perfectly frank with you. Well, I mean, you and Mark, fine, but I still think someone from the housing authority should be part of that interviewing process. Because what's gonna happen, you, let's say you and Mark, there were choose three people, because I heard three. So we don't know anything about these people. And I don't think that's right if we're on the board.
Yeah.
I'm also very concerned about some of the politicking that
Yeah,
I've seen
I
from the
am too.
board when, in regards to the housing authority. So I would also think that there needs to be a participant from the housing board in those meetings, in those interviews, so that we can make sure that we're not hiring people who are just, or not hiring, but allowing someone on the board who has another motive other than to provide housing for the community.
No, I have some of those same concerns. I didn't have the support to include someone else on that. I have shared the application with Scott.
So you have,
Yes, I have.
oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to.
Yeah.
I must have missed them.
I shared, let me know.
Okay.
I shared a link. I haven't even had hard on there. They're in the cloud. Sometimes that stuff doesn't work as well.
I'll
But
check.
I shared a link to my personal Dropbox folder that has all those.
Okay.
They're all zipped, and if you have any problem,
Thanks.
but I did share that with you, and I really value Scott's opinions and input on that. I think the decision statutorily is assigned, again, I support the statute, is assigned to the town board. Sometimes I think from a governance standpoint, the legislature said that on purpose. There could be, and I'm not saying there has been, but when boards start appointing their own members or picking their own members, there could be kind of a
I'm not
essential
saying-
circle there.
We need to pick it. I'm just saying, like, our voice should be heard
Yeah,
in regards to those applications.
Right. And hopefully Scott can voice some of that, and some opinions, and what the needs are. Part of it is, when you have a board like this, it's a little different because you're a working board. You're a governing board, but you're also a working board. And there are certain expertises and there are certain, I guess you say, holes to fill. He has a certain expertise, you have a certain expertise, and then there may be places where we're missing certain expertise or knowledge. And we may not be aware of that. And that's where Scott's input saying, well, this person would fit well because of their background. This person is redundant because we already have somebody who does that. Or more so, this person has an extra grind with the board. I want people on the board who are dedicated to the mission and the organization. I have seen people get on governing boards where they say that there's a watchdog. We don't need a watchdog on the board. We need people to support it. I think the board has the integrity to do it themselves. We need to provide people that provide the strategic direction of the staff. So I can't say that there will be someone from the board, and in fact, I can say there won't be because there isn't the support to do that. But hopefully, and if you want to share those and talk to other people with this group, I'm fine with that, and get the input on any of those candidates. But the final decision has to be, and even with Mark and I will just make a recommendation that it's up to the whole board to make. So I think the more important discussion is going to be the one about on the 11th about how much influence the town board should have over this board. I can tell you that even when we had the joint meeting, there was a request to have you come and appear before the town board. I said, oh, that's not appropriate. So I'm glad, let's have a joint meeting where there are peer organizations dealing with something, not you were coming before the town board.
I think there's a lack of understanding of, from some of the town board members that, assume that the housing authority is a subset.
Right.
Of, that's smart town government. And that's not true.
And that, you know, I'm kind of a student of governance, taught classes in it and stuff. And there are different types of boards, and governance is probably the one thing that people understand the least. We talk about management, we talk about leadership. People understand that the governance, I think, is a third item. And there are many types of boards. And you are a working board, you are a governing board. You are not an advisory board to the town. This would be different if it was an advisory board and we were picking people to advise us to make decisions. That's a whole different type of relationship.
And the relationship over the last 25 years, from between the town and the housing authority has been a partnership. It's been a cooperative entity, a cooperative agreement, interaction for the benefit of the community, specifically around housing and housing issues. And we develop everything, 10 units for very low income. It's our first project. Now over 300 units to encompass the workforce, as well as to housing and lower income, and also supporting the private sector that is building income control houses.
I think it's worked well. I think it's a good model. I think that was the intention of the legislature. And I think some of this has changed because, right, some of the newer town board members don't see how the relationship works, how the statute's set up. The other thing is, you got a lot more money and you're a lot more visible. You know, it's kind of under the radar now. Now you're way above the radar because of 60 and everything else.
And we are very much aware of that.
Yeah.
We're very aware of particularly styles, that relationship, the interaction with the community. Trying to make sure that everybody understands where the money's coming from, where it's going, and what people need.
So bottom line is that discussion, I didn't want to have the interviews if the town board is going to direct us to look at differently. Statutorily, there was some discussion of more town board members on this board. Statutorily, it's only allowed to have one.
That's correct.
Which, again, I think that's the legislature saying they don't want the political body to have too much influence with this. The philosophy on the other side that I've heard from town board members is this is a board that controls an awful lot of tax dollars with no accountability to the voters because you weren't elected. And that accountability to the voters falls on the elected representatives, which is the town board, and they should have more of a fiduciary responsibility in the operation of this board because they are directly responsible. I don't necessarily agree with that whole philosophy. I do understand it, why they would look at that. Having governing bodies that manage tax dollars that are not directly accountable to the voters who are paying those taxes is kind of an awkward arrangement.
But aren't they by proxy? Because it's specifically 6E funds. The rest of the work that this organization does is funded differently. But
And it is
6E
because
funds-
it is because of the 60 bucks.
So, but then there's other arrangements and MOUs that hold them accountable through my role in the transparency and use of those funds.
I'm just telling you what the philosophy is myself.
I understand that, but just for
I'm not-
public knowledge, it really is just that 6E funding, which we have those guardrails in place through our
Yeah,
the housing authority.
and I think that's how the town board should govern that. I mean, we are responsible for this. So actually, Business Park is, but the like Visitor Park. It's pretty complicated.
And the county plays a role.
And the
lots of
county plays a role.
IGAs and legal agreements that have put those checks and balances in place.
But part of that is there's, and I understand the philosophy that the buck stops with people who are voted into office by the citizens. And that would be the Board of County Commissioners. So that discussion that comes up on the 11th is very important. And then after that, kind of have our marching orders. Yeah, it'll take a while to set that up. In the meantime, I've asked Mark and I do the same thing, go through those 14 and kind of prioritize with Scott's input. I really don't want to interview 14. Not to go through that many, narrow it down like you would with any job. Maybe pick 5 that we want to interview at the most. And if we don't like those, but Mark and I can agree on 5 we want to interview. Have those ready to go, kind of on deck, so we can move pretty quickly after that.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope, that's it. That was a lot of good things.
When? Joe? Oh.
Nope.
Oh,
Yes.
of course.
Our office move is at the moment scheduled, for August 18th through 21st. We have officially completely run out of physical space in this office. So I have already moved to a degree into my makeshift office at Skyview, because we physically have run out of space, to house everyone here, as we knew was going to happen. So we're doing a pre-walkthrough of our existing space and new space with our movers, provider of furniture. What they call that, on Monday afternoon. So barring that conversation going well and the order being fulfilled, then it'll take a few days to get it space. Likewise, this building is under contract to be purchased. The prospective buyer is actually on site right now. And they're doing an inspection of the building. This will be our last board meeting in this space, as they are closing this space down, and the further on the street is that it will be turned into a different use, most likely retail. So we will lose this space. Our next board meeting will be at the community center in August. In which room?
Chiquita.
In the Chiquita room. Same time, different back place. You guys got that, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. No, I did not. And then moving beyond the August meeting, we do anticipate, I believe the space will work. It was structured that way that we will hold our board meetings in our new office space. We designed it in a way that we believe it'll fit, and we can use a little bit of spill out space into this common area that we created. So we believe that will work. We'll at least give it a good go, so we don't have to put meetings or pay meeting space. So I anticipate those changes and notices to come up for subsequent meetings. And I think that's all I have.
The only other thing is that I have was to 2026 AMI. Anything else? We are adjourned. Thank you everyone for your time and efforts.
May I also get a copy of that AMI too? Send one out. So, send it out.
That's